Here at the Literaturhaus Berlin, and I would like to welcome you here in the Große Saal and over there in the stream. I'm very happy to have you here tonight. And I confess that in the last days I kept scrolling down our website to tonight's event, actually because I love the title so much, Translation, Poetry, Resistance. This is just such a beautiful trio that sounds almost like a life motto, and therefore I'm expecting really a lot from our great guests here tonight. And I'm sure we all will be strengthened in our spirits listening to their conversation. And therefore, let me welcome tonight Don Mee Choi, artist and poet, and holding the Picador Guest Professorship in Leipzig. And welcome to Uljana Wolf, also poet and translator of Don Mee Choi's poems, and Sung-Hoon Gang, who will be the moderator tonight. He is a research associate in the Department of Korean Studies at the Universität Bonn. And the German voice you hear in your ear, if you have a headphone, is Lilian Astrid Gese. She is translating simultaneously tonight. A warm thank you goes out to the Picador Guest Professorship Leipzig, who is our cooperation partner here tonight. And a very warm thank you goes to all of you for resisting the pandemic and the horrible weather and coming here for the sake of poetry and translations. I wish you all a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.
Hallo, guten Abend. 안녕하세요. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Translation, Poetry, Resistance. I'm Sung-Hoon Gang, a researcher and podcaster based in Cologne, Germany. Tonight, we will meet and converse with two authors whose works have enthused many readers and critics. Don Mee Choi is the author of several volumes of poems, including DMZ Colony, Harley War, The Morning News Exciting, and other chapbooks and essays. As poet and translator, Don Mee Choi has won several internationally renowned prizes and fellowships. Don Mee Choi is also this year's Picador Professor for Literature at the University of Leipzig. The Picador Guest Professorship for Literature brings leading English language writers to Leipzig University's American Studies program to teach creative writing and literary studies. The project is based on a partnership between Holzbrink Berlin, the German Academic Exchange Service, and the University of Leipzig. Next to their teaching at American Studies Leipzig, Picador Guest Professors share their work and expertise with the broader public in readings and other forums that address the potentials of literature for our contemporary society. Within this framework, I had the honor to talk with Don Mee already last December about DMZ Colony and Harley War, and I'm very excited to finally meet her in person to learn more about her translations of contemporary feminist Korean poems, particularly that of Kim Hye-sun. Uljana Wolf is a poet and translator as well. Among others, she published volumes of poems including Meine schönste Längewitsch, Falsche Freunde, and Kochani, ich hab Brot gekauft. As a translator, she crosses borders between English, German, Polish, and Belarusian, and also has translated Ilse Eichinger's poems into English and Christian Hawkey's works into German, among many others. Most recently, a collection of her essays and speeches on poetry and translation was published as a book entitled Etymologischer Gossip. Moreover, she's currently working on the German translation of Don Mee Choi's DMZ Colony, which will be published by Spectre Books this fall. I'm very happy to converse with you tonight, Uljana. So let's meet our authors. Hi, Don Mee, and hi, Uljana.
Hi. Oh, hi.
So nice to see you.
Thank you.
I think one thing that we shared in common is that we teach or we taught this semester at the university, and you as guest professor at the University of Leipzig, and you also in Berlin, I guess. So how was your teaching experience and how did your semester go?
Well, for me, I taught poetry writing to undergraduates, and then for graduates, we discussed Asian American poetry. And for both classes, they were great. The students really made the classes. And I felt very welcomed by the students as well as the staff. And so it has been a very rewarding experience for me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And how about you, Uljana?
Yeah, I taught this fall at the Institut für Sprachkunst in Vienna, actually, but back in October as a block. So before everything shut down again, I was actually able to go and have it in person, which was great. It was a class on essay writing, or essay writing, as I call it, and it was great. And I'm just reading the papers of the essays this week.
Right.
Yes.
So you also have plenty of works ahead of you, but tonight we can just talk about our works. Yeah, well, we'll just start this event with Dommi's reading of her own texts, but also her translations. And after that, we'll go to Uljana's own text and her translation, and then we can talk about this text. May I ask you to, read your text, Dommi?
All right. I began to translate contemporary Korean feminist poets after living in the US for about 15 years. For the first 5 years, I was a foreign student, but once I graduated, I didn't know what I was anymore. Whenever I applied for jobs, I was told certain things about myself. I was told that I had a strange accent. What kind of accent is it? You seem too shy. Are you sure you're competent for the job? Why don't you stick with a simpler content for your teaching? Since I didn't understand the real meaning of these questions, I couldn't answer them. I had no choice but to jump to a conclusion about myself. I suffered from lack of language. It was the most logical conclusion given the circumstance of my foreign condition. Eventually, I came to realize that besides my strange accent, crippling shyness, and lack of language, I also suffered from a nameless void. I knew very little about the country I was born in, where I grew up as a child. I ventured into translation as a way of examining what Korea was about. I also wanted to know how women poets survived and what they wrote during the brutal military dictatorship in the 70s and 80s. While I was enjoying an abundance of American Ritz crackers in Hong Kong, then flailing about in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Is my home also free? Do I even have a home? Clearly, I didn't look or sound brave. So what was I? I needed to find out what was ailing or failing me. During my translation journey, I found out that I've always been a daughter of neo-colony, and that my nameless void stems from South Korea's neo-colonial condition. I learned that the contemporary history of Korea is so directly tied to the US imperial wars it had waged in Asia that we might as well be one big family, globally speaking. This explained why I had made the choice of going to the US to study, and later chose the US again when my parents relocated to Frankfurt before settling permanently in Australia. This choice of mine was totally logical given the circumstance of my nameless void. I must admit, neo-colonial condition manifests in mysterious ways. I was global even before I was born a Korean. And to explain what I mean by neo-colonial condition and to give some historical context of my translation practice, I will read from a short, I'll read a short excerpt from my pamphlet published by Ugly Duckling Press. It's called Translation is a Mode equals Translation is an anti-neo-colonial mode. As you may know, the first half of the title is from Harry Zone's translation of The Task of the Translator by Walter Benjamin. The other half, I hope, is its twin, a retranslation, a radical hybrid of Benjamin's brilliant concept and an anti-neocolonial stance I have come to choose over the past 15 years of translating contemporary feminist Korean poetry. This hybridity comes from a land divided by the superpowers of the Cold War. Prior to the US intervention, Korea was under Japanese colonial rule. This year, 2022, marks the 77th anniversary of Korea's division and the 70th anniversary of the ceasefire that suspended the Korean War of 1950 to 53. Most recently, in 2018, the North Korean and South Korean leaders have signed the Panmunjom Declaration, calling for peace and reunification. However, without a formal peace treaty agreed by all parties, North and South Korea, China, and the US, the two Koreas remain technically at war. Nearly 4 million, mostly civilians, were killed during the war. I come from a land where we are taught that the US saved us from commies and that North Korea is our enemy. I come from a land of neocolonial fratricide. I come from such two-ness. I speak as a twin. The US established a temporary military rule of Korea from 1945 to 48 and never left. South Korean activists say there are nearly 100 US military bases and installations in South Korea, a land only 1/4 the size of California. Most of the bases are in the process of being consolidated into 2 massive bases, one of which will become the largest overseas US military base called Camp Humphreys. Currently, there are approximately 28,000 US troops stationed in South Korea. In time of war, the US military has operational control over South Korean forces. Since we are still technically at war, we are also technically and perpetually under US military command. I come from such neo-colony. Since the end of the Korean War, the US and South Korea have carried out joint military exercises. The names of these joint exercises are worthy of our attention as translators. Counter, blow, strong, shield, focus, lens, team, spirit, RSO and I, reception, staging, onward movement, and integration. Key, resolve, fold, eagle, and most recently, vigilant, ace. These are neocolonial joints, hybrids, spirits. These are order words, to use Deleuze and Guattari's term. I traverse such order words and map them, and superimpose another kind of map, the map of my dislocation, including my translations of Kim Il-sung's poetry. For me, Benjamin's translation is a mode, must be jointed with translation, is an anti-neocolonial mode. I must speak as a radical twin. Sorry to just stop there. Because of time, I have to now read a few translations. And I'm going to read 3 poems from Autobiography of Death. It's by Kim Il-sung, and I translated it in 2018. Published by New Directions. 질식, 48세. 그리하여 숨, 그러자 숨, 그 다음엔 숨, 이어서 숨, 그래서 숨, 그렇게 숨, 그리고 숨, 그대로 숨, 그러다가 숨, 그래서 숨, 항상 숨, 이윽고 숨, 언제나 숨, 그런데 숨, 그러나 숨, 그러므로 숨, 그럼에도 불구하고 숨, 끝끝내 숨. 죽음은 숨쉬고 너는 꿈꾸었지만 이제 죽음에게서 인공 호흡기를 뗄 시간, 이제 꿈을 깰 망치가 필요한 시간. Asphyxiation. Day 46. hence breath, then breath, next breath, subsequent breath, because breath, such breath, and breath, same breath, thereafter breath, thus breath, always breath, eventually breath, perpetually breath, yet breath, however breath, therefore breath, in spite of breath, breath till the bitter end. Death breathes and you dream, but it's time to remove the ventilator from death. It's time to shatter the dream with a hammer. I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you what this book is about. Kim Il-sung wrote 49 poems, and each poem represents one of the 49 days during which the spirit roams after death till it enters the reincarnation, cycle of reincarnation. So this is a Buddhist concept. And she wrote these poems after the April of 2014 incident involving a ferry carrying passengers and high school students who were going on a field trip to an island. And this ferry sank very slowly, and it was televised live. And the government, everybody was watching this, and the government was, of course, watching it, and they did very little to rescue the passengers and the students, especially. They could have survived because they were all wearing life jackets, but instead they were told to stay in their cabins. So 250 students drowned. So she said she had no choice but to write these poems, and to speak from death, and speak about these unjust death, not only this ferry incident, but also the many incidents, brutal violence that took place during the military dictatorship. Calendar, day 2. A white rabbit dies and becomes a red rabbit. It bleeds even after it's dead. Soon the red rabbit becomes a black rabbit. It rots even after it's dead. Because it's dead, it can become big or small at will. When it's huge, it's like a cloud. And when it's tiny, it's like an ant. You try shoving an ant rabbit into your ear. The ant rabbit eats everything in sight, the wide grass field inside your ear. Then it gives birth to 2 bunnies bigger than a storm cloud. Your ears are buzzing. Every sound is buzzing. Your ear is dying. A rabbit is dying. Sometimes a dead rabbit reincarnates as a bloodied menstrual pad. Occasionally, you pull out a dead rabbit from your panties. Every month, you pull out a dead rabbit and hang it on the wall. On the wall, you hang a crying that smells like rabbit's ears. Lord, no. Day 36. That you live with Lord, no, he who descends from the mountain. That you sleep with the one who created you. You eat at the same table with the one who claims to feed and raise you, the one who strips bare the world he has made. You live with him who slaps your mummy's back, crinkles your mummy's brain map, and secretly locks the door to the outside world and discards the key. That you fall asleep with Lord No, who shouts, "Earn your keep." You keep shouting in your head, "I was born alone, I have nothing to do with you." Your sibling couldn't eat anything in front of him. She could only weep, vomit, and think of the waves of music. She wrapped herself in them, ran around in bed like a hedgehog, huffing and puffing from aphasia. 아님께서 아님을 아니하시고 아님의 아니하고 아니하시니 아님이 아니하온지라 아님을 아니하고 아니하여 아니하되 아님이 아닌 아님은 아님이 아니나니 아님이 아님의 아님이요 아닌 아님은 아님이 아니나니 아님이 아님을 아니할 아님이요 아닌 아님은 아님이 아니나니 아님이 아님을 아님으로 아닐 아님이요 아님의 아님하고 아님 아닌 아님은 아님이 아니나니 아님이 아닐 아님이요 아니하기 아니한 아님은 아님이 아니나니 아님이 아니하기 아님을 아니할 아니함이요 아님이 아니한 아님은 아님이 아니나니 아님이 아님을 아니할 아님이요 아니하기 아니하는 아님은 아님이 아니니 아님이 아니면 아님이라 아님을 아니할 아님이요 아님을 아니하니 아님을 하여 아님을 아니한 아님은 아님이 아니나니 아님이 아님의 아님이라 아님을 아니하여 아님을 아니하고 아니하니 아님으로 아님을 아니하여 아니고 아닌 아님을 아니할 아님에게 아님이 아님 하나니 아니하고 아니하라 아님에서 아님의 아님이 아님이라 아닌 아님의 아니하던 아님을 아님같이 아니하였느니라. Lord, no, does not Lord, no, and none, and not, and Lord, no, thus Lord, no, does not, none, never, Lord, no, nevertheless. Lord, no, who is not Lord, no, is never Lord, no, thus Lord, no, is Lord, no, of Lord, no. Not Lord, no, is not Lord, no, thus Lord, no, is Lord, no, who will none to Lord, no. Not Lord, no, is not Lord, no, thus Lord, no, is Lord, no, who will never Lord, no, to Lord, no. Lord, no, who is not Lord, no, Lord, no, to Lord, no, is not Lord, no, thus is not Lord, no. Lord, no, whom Lord, no, never, not, is not Lord, no, thus never, none, not, to Lord, no. Lord, no, who is not Lord, no, is never Lord, no. Thus Lord, no, is Lord, no, who will not, to Lord, no. Lord, no, who does not, none is not Lord, no. Thus Lord, no, is Lord, no, of Lord, no. Hence is Lord, no, who will not Lord, no. Lord, no, who is never Lord, no, and none. Lord, no, is not Lord, no. Thus Lord, no, is Lord, no, of Lord, no. None to Lord, no, then no, to Lord, no, and never thus not, Lord, no, by Lord, no, is not, Lord, no, is not, Lord, no, to Lord, no, do not and not, Lord, no, is Lord, no, of Lord, no, from Lord, no, who did not, to Lord, no, was none like Lord, no. That you live with Lord, no, that you must end the prayer in his Son's name, that you must live with the one who made the law, yet with its crocodile-like eyes, he tells you to beware of a snake-like friend, that you live forever with Lord, no, who slaps your face, that you live with the naked light, who asks you, whenever you undress, aren't you ashamed? Thank you.
Okay, dann mache ich weiter. Guten Abend. Ich werde 2 kurze Texte aus dem Buch Etymologischer Gossip lesen, also aus dem Essayband, um ja auch so eine Art vielleicht Spuren- oder Herkunftsraum aufzumachen, in dem wir uns hier bewegen mit Übersetzung und grenzensprengenden Verfahren. Und danach 3 Texte aus DMZ Colony auf Deutsch. Und das erste ist, also die sind auf, sorry, I just said all of that in German. Let me repeat. I'm going to, because I'm switching, I'm going to read 2 texts in German from the essay book, which Sung-Un mentioned. There are 2 essays, short, sort of about the trajectory of translation and poetry and something else, which sort of serve as a form of introduction. There is a draft of an English translation, but I didn't. It's not ready to be shared, but it's being translated by Sophie Seiter, a wonderful translator who translated my poems also. And after that, I will read 3 or 4 German translations of DMZ Colony. And then we'll talk. Yes, okay. Aus dem Logbuch für etymologischen Gossip. Form hilft dem Denken, sich zu erinnern. Es stellt sich heraus, dass das Wort stringent an eine Schnur erinnert, auf der sich das Denken in einzelnen Kugeln aufreiht. Alle anderen Etymologien lügen. Der Abstand zwischen den Kugeln kann sehr groß sein, damit das Denken Zeit hat, sich zu vergessen. Jede Kugel, die auch ein Kasten sein kann, ein Kästchen, ein Kätzchen, wiedererinnert sich anders als die vorhergehende. Nur so bleibt das Denken dringend. Die vielen Sprachen verhelfen der Form zu ihrem Schnursein, ihrem Schnurren. Genau, und jetzt einen kurzen Auszug aus einem Essay, der eigentlich eine Rede war vor der Deutschen Akademie für Sprache und Dichtung. Und der heißt Vom Grundrecht gondelnder Wolken. Ich habe einmal eine Form erfunden, die ich Gessay nannte, eine Art Unterbietung des Essays in seinem Versuch, ein Versuch zu sein. Den ersten schrieb ich 2007 in New York als Begleittext für die gemeinsam mit Steffen Popp übersetzten Gedichte von Christian Hawkey. Wer das englische Verb to guess nachschlägt, darf, geleitet vom mittelenglischen guessen, irgendwo zwischen schätzen und zielen Platz nehmen und wird unterrichtet, das Präteritum guest nicht mit seinem Homonym guest, dem Gast, zu verwechseln. Gerade in dieser Verwechslung aber scheinen sich meine Texte seit Jahren einzurichten, wie im Gondel-G des Gessays, einer Seilbahn, die sie Formen und Sprachen und Ländern als Gast zuträgt, was ungefähr hieße, nie ganz gehalten und zugleich im anderen überall empathisch und potenziell mitenthalten zu sein. Als wäre die Möglichkeit, jenes und zugleich ein anderes zu sein, ein Grundrecht, das sich nicht nur im Übersetzen, also im Dichten mit Zielsprache, sondern auch im Dichten, im Übersetzen ohne gesicherte Zielsprache zu praktizieren versuche. Vielleicht gibt es diese Verwechslung aber auch nur, weil ich aus einem Land komme, das es nicht mehr gibt. Man lebt dann gewissermaßen in disparaten Zeiten mit der niemals zu Ende empfangenen Erinnerung um den niemals zu Ende zugestellten Augenblick der Gegenwart. Dazwischen schweben Empfänger, die nichts von ihren Sendern wissen und Sender, die ihre Kanäle vermissen. Eine unermessliche Anzahl von Anfängen, sanft, offen, auf verstörende Weise vertraut, wie gondelnde Wolken. Das Land, das es nicht mehr gibt, sind eigentlich zwei Länder. Ich komme aus der Deutschen Demokratischen Republik und einer Verwechslung zufolge komme ich auch aus Polen. Aber nur dem, aus dem ich nie kam, als man noch dachte, dass ich wegen meines Debütbands Kochanie, ich habe Brot gekauft, aus Polen käme. Das normale Polen gibt es natürlich noch. Das Polen, aus dem ich nie gekommen bin, ginge so. Meine schlesische Großmutter, eine junge Lehrerin, unterm Arm das in grünen Riffelstoff eingerollte Tafelsilber, dreht sich, bevor sie für immer das väterliche Eisenbahnerhäuschen am Oderknie verlassen muss, noch einmal um, reicht der eben ankommenden ukrainischen Großmutter, der kanadischen Dichterin Erin Murray, den Schlüssel zu ihrem Haus und dann trinken sie noch einen Kaffee, lesen ökumenisch aus dem Kaffeesatz und schreiben auf Chakhlachisch eine Postkarte an die Mutter des Dichters Eugeniusz Kaczyk-Kędycki aus dem Landkreis Przemyskie an der polnisch-ukrainischen Grenze. All diese Lebensläufe und Fluchtlinien und Neuanfänge fließen nämlich merkwürdigerweise in meinen Texten zusammen, in denen, die ich übersetze oder denen, die ich schreibe, als wäre Dichtung ein Archiv dieser unermesslich verstörten Anfänge oder zumindest Posteinlaufstelle translationaler Sendungen aller Provenienz. Genau, vielleicht soweit erstmal aus diesem Text. Danke. Ich lese, I'm going to read the beginning of DMZ Colony from the chapter Wings of Return. Im Moment, also es ist eine Arbeitsfassung, im Moment noch Flügel der Rückkehr, klingt nicht ganz so gut, aber ist erstmal wörtlich sozusagen. Die Mitte einer Nation, der 38. Breitengrad. Die demilitarisierte Zone DMZ Koreas ist ca. 250 Kilometer lang und 4 Kilometer breit. Die DMZ verläuft entlang des 38. Breitengrads, der nach dem Zweiten Weltkrieg zum Ende der 35-jährigen japanischen Besatzung als Teilungslinie festgelegt wurde. Die USA besetzen den Süden, die Sowjetunion den Norden. Noch immer halten die USA Südkorea mit Militäranlagen, Stützpunkten und Truppen besetzt. Die innerkoreanische Grenze ist eine der am stärksten militarisierten Grenzen der Welt. St. Louis, Missouri, 38. Breitengrad. Am 23. Februar 2018, dem Tag meiner Lesung mit Daniel Bożycki in der Pulitzer Arts Foundation, ging ich durch den Forest Park in St. Louis, Missouri. Ich lief in südliche Richtung zum Kunstmuseum von St. Louis, als ich ein fernes Rufen bemerkte, gedämpft ein vielstimmiges Klagen. Noch nie zuvor hatte ich den Schrei der Schneegänse gehört. Die Fülle des Geräuschs, das von irgendwo und nirgendwo und überall zu kommen schien, verwirrte mich. Instinktiv drehte ich den Kopf nach rechts, nach links, dann nach oben. Mein Kopf tief im Nacken löste Schwindel aus, ein bekanntes Symptom des Morbus Meniere. Meine Ohren flatterten, konfus wie Spatzen, den wandernden Schneegänsen nach. Die Gänse gaben mir eine Anweisung, einen Refrain. Zurück, 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 zurück. Dann flogen sie höher, zu hoch für meine Ohren. Sicher bedauerten die Schneegänse den heimwehkranken Spatzen, denn sie schickten mir eine kleine Zeile aus dem Himmel. See you at DMZ. Allein zurückgelassen konnte ich nur noch chilpen. Übersetzerin frei. Suche Arbeit, suche Arbeit. Was ich von meiner Kindheit erinnere, sind Kinder, nicht viel älter als ich, die am späten Nachmittag kamen und um Essen bettelten, selbst um verdorbene Reste. Wegen der Alarmübungen an der Schule, die uns auf Angriffe von Nordkorea vorbereiten sollten, lag ich nachts ängstlich wach. Ich fürchtete, der ewig drohende Krieg würde mich von meiner Familie trennen. Ich fürchtete, was meine Mutter fürchtete, dass mein Bruder, von den Protesten mitgerissen, inhaftiert und gefoltert werden könnte. Nachts war unser Radio ausgeschaltet, damit man nicht glaubte, wir seien Sympathisanten Nordkoreas. In der Schule hielten ehemalige nordkoreanische Spione Vorträge über den bösen Führer Nordkoreas. Ich stand an Bushaltestellen und versuchte, nordkoreanische Spione zu entdecken, fand aber nur amerikanische GIs. Meine Freunde und ich winkten ihnen zu, riefen Hellos. In unserem kleinen Hof spielte ich mit Springseil, Puppenhaus und meinen Papierpuppen, umgeben von großen, glasierten Fermentiertöpfen voller Gemüse und strengen, scharfen Pasten. Ich fürchtete ihre Schatten auf dem Pfad zum Toilettenhäuschen. Geschichten von ausgesetzten kleinen Mädchen rumorten in mir, und ich stellte mir vor, die einsamen Säuglinge steckten jetzt in diesen Töpfen. Immer wenn ich den Schatten gehorchte, erschienen winzige, schwankende Arme von Schimmeln bedeckt. Wenn es schneite, baute ich auf den Deckeln der Töpfe winzige Schneemänner. Kinder können wie Ratten auch im Dunkeln fröhlich sein. Die größte Dunkelheit aber war die mitternächtliche Ausgangssperre. Ich wusste nicht, was sie versperrte, bis meine Familie 1972 den Ausgang fand und in Hongkong landete. So groß war die Dunkelheit. One more. Nein, ich lese noch weiter. Im Jahr 1980 filmte mein Vater die aufkommenden Studentenproteste gegen die Diktatur in Seoul. Der Vater ist eine Figur, die auch im Vorgängerband Hardly War aufkommt. Er war ein Foto- und Filmjournalist in Asien. Im Jahr 1980 filmte mein Vater die aufkommenden Studentenproteste gegen die Diktatur in Seoul. Er wurde auch Zeuge der brutalen Niederschlagung des demokratischen Aufstands in Gwangju. Damals glaubte er, die Diktatur würde nie enden und dass wir zu Hause nicht mehr sicher sein würden. Um die Operation meines älteren Bruders bezahlen zu können, der während des Militärdienstes verwundet worden war, verkaufte er eine seiner Kameras. Für die Entlassung meines verwundeten Bruders aus dem Militär und die Erlaubnis, aus Südkorea auszureisen, überließ er der südkoreanischen Regierung Aufnahmen, die er von einem Studentenprotest in Downtown Seoul gefilmt hatte, aus großer Distanz, von einem Dach. Er glaubte, dass er uns so vor dem Leben in ewiger Dunkelheit bewahren könnte. 1983 verstreute sich dann meine Familie in der ganzen Welt, wie meine Mutter sagte. Meine Eltern und mein jüngerer Bruder flogen nach Westdeutschland, meine Schwester blieb in Hongkong, mein älterer Bruder ging nach Australien und ich flog in die USA, um mein Kunststudium abzuschließen. Im Licht litten wir unter Trennung und Heimweh. Im Licht versuchten wir uns irgendwie niederzulassen, wie meine Mutter sagte. Im Licht lebten wir wie die Vögel. Dankeschön.
Thank you, Don-Mi, and thank you, Uljana, for sharing your text and your translations. And I think we're now ready to learn more about the work behind this text. And I'm going to ask you first, or both of you, maybe, because I think most of us have this experience that we, with or without knowing it, translating, but very rudimentarily. When you're on the street, for example, when you in a foreign street, we try to figure out where we are, or in a restaurant, we figure out what we are going to eat. But only few of us have this experience of translating poems. So how did you come to the translating poems? Well, you're not only poets, but also translators. Is it a natural thing to do as a poet?
Should I answer first? Definitely not natural. Actually, I thought that I was going to translate fiction because that's what I read first, contemporary Korean women fiction writers. But once I encountered poetry by Kim Hae-soon, Choi Seung-ja and Lee Yeon-ju, these are women who began publishing in the late 70s and early 80s. And, you know, I've really never read any poems like this before, so I really had, I just sort of dived into their poetry. And that was sort of a process, you know, that's how it all started anyway. So.
And how about you, Uljana?
For me, I think what was a sort of initiation was a translation workshop of Polish poetry, which I did in my early 20s, not speaking Polish at that time. And that was a workshop where we worked together with intermediary translators and the writers for a couple of days. And it tied translation and writing and the communication and bridging gaps with, you know, with fingers and all kinds of languages floating in a room, very closely together for me. And poetry as a way of looking at your language in a sort of foreignized way was sort of what I took out from that workshop. And so, yeah, that's how it started.
Okay. Thank you. And I have a question to Don-Mi, because, well, I think every poetry poses a very unique challenge. But before I heard Don-Mi's translation of Kim Hae-soon's poetry, particularly that of Days 36, I didn't think that it was translatable, because as you could hear, there is an overwhelming amount of a repetition of a certain word, which is anim. And so I was really astonished as I first read and heard her translation. So how did you approach this specific work, and if there was any challenge, how did you deal with it?
Yeah, so anim means no, and Korean has many, you can have many variations, endings, especially with adverbs and adjectives. And she also uses no as a noun in this poem. But before I sort of actually get into the actual how I chose certain words, what Kim Il-sung says is that vowels are connected to the wholes of the body, and that the sounds of the vowels can be made by organs like lungs, diaphragm, kidneys, genitals, heart, and that these vowel sounds are always embarrassing to meaning. So what I sort of understood, what I understand by what she said about, that these sounds are embarrassing sounds to meaning. It's like these are meaning sort of associated with power and also patriarchal power, because Korea is a very patriarchal culture. And so it sounds in Korean is one of the vowels. So that's what she's repeating, and she's creating many different endings of anim. So then I thought, well, then I have to, no, O has already the O English vowel sound. So, and then nim just by itself is a Korean honorific. Korean language has many levels of speech depending on who you are speaking to. So I thought, okay, I'll just sort of combine that Lord, no, not, none. So I'm just trying to emphasize that sound O in the English version. So that's how I sort of ended up translating that poem. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really know how this poem sounded actually till I heard Kim Il-sung read. Then it sounded really like a chant, like a Buddhist chant. So then I thought, okay, so this poem is not only about refusal, saying no, but it sort of turns that meaning of the Lord no against itself. It cancels sort of that cancels itself out, but it's also kind of resisting what she calls as what she refers to as the structure of death that we remain living in. So that's how I understood this poem.
Wow! So you found a way to the poem, well, through her other texts, but also through the sound of specific words as well. Mm-hmm. Fascinating. And I have another question to Uljana. Well, just for the English-speaking audience at home or here, I'll just sum up briefly what Uljana read tonight. Well, I think the geopolitical coordinates of your places of your birth, but also the place where you're grown up, they are replaced by something else. Like through these places are still there, but they are now under different names, under different political system. To be blunt, we can Google South Korea or Seoul, then we can find a way to there. But if we Google East Germany, or if we Google Schlesien, we cannot find a way to there. And I think that's the difference between the places of your childhood, maybe, or places that are affiliated with you. Well, and then instead of introducing yourself to the audience or to people, you chose to diffuse yourself. Instead of saying, I'm doing this and that, I'm from there and that, I'm this person, you took us on a ride onto the gondol ride and also flight while you're zooming in and zooming out to the sceneries where you're grown up, but also imaginary scenery of your grandmother. And you take this also to a linguistic level, and at certain point of your text, you also calls for confusion as a way of, as I understood it, way of connecting ourselves to poetry or even translation. And as a foreigner living and working in Germany and in foreign languages, as is English or German, I often find myself trying to make others understand. So I try to find the most clear word I can use. So I was quite surprised to read that you say that, well, let's diffuse, or let's be confused. So how come?
Yeah, thank you for sort of summing that up briefly. For me, it was important to talk about a little bit my background here, or sort of bring this here, because we haven't really talked about it, but we're talking about translation and poetry, but we also, in the background, there is the idea of translingual writing, or a translational writing, which Don Mee practices, which I, to different degree, practice, and which poets who I am interested in, who I translate, practice. Many of those poets practice it out of a biographical background of diaspora or forced migration, where a language confusion or a situation of incomprehensibility is then reflected in the poetry, which often also means that the political norms behind ideas of borders, purity, linguistic purity, and so on, are brought out into daylight in these poems and reflected on and criticized. For me, it's a different situation. I didn't really come to it biographical. I didn't come to it by force or by diaspora. I grew up in one German country, then I grew up in another German country after unification. Everything was the same, the language stayed the same, but there was a gap, right? There is a sort of gap. And then I lived in the US for 10 years and am sort of leading a bilingual life. But in a sort of, again, not out of force. But even in that moment, for example, living in America, I found myself in a sort of translingual or a mishmash of language gap, right? When you make mistakes, when you suddenly have an accent in your home language, and a lot of things that are very confusing are happening. You become unintelligible to yourself, to others. And I, like most people, I experienced shame when this happened. But I also thought, why are we experiencing shame, and what are the norms that are sort of the society brings to our experience? Because often the lack of language that you talk about on Me Too in your text is only a lack of language because it comes up against a sort of grid that doesn't understand what you bring to it. Often lack of language is actually an abundance of language, or abundance of illegitimate connections between languages, right? Which is what I call the gossip, the etymological gossip. So people who seem to have no language actually have so much, but we just can't read them, you know? It's a normal story of immigrants. So I was interested in all of these mechanisms that make us feel shame, and sort of went in there and made poems out of mistakes, made poems out of false friends, made poems out of these translingual gaps. And that way I think I sort of, deflected the things that you talked about, the uncomfortability. Of course, in real life, we all want to be intelligible, and we all want to be able to understand and speak the language and connect. But when it doesn't happen, it's not our fault mostly, right? It's some other constellations and political notions that make us feel that way. I don't know if that really answered your questions, but
it did, and more than that. And we try really hard to be intelligible people. So. Well, since we have some time, I would love to ask one or two more questions to you. And I'd like to learn more about DMZ Colony and the work of translation of this specific piece that you read tonight. So, Don Mee, at the beginning of your poetry collection, DMZ Colony, you describe the experience of watching these snow geese, and you use this word, you translate them. It's not like the things we know from antique poets who said, I have this inspiration, but you said you translate them. Which moments speak to you, or what catches your attention to be translated, and how do you do that? How do you translate birds flying over the sky into words of yours?
Maybe I should say something about to answer that question. I should first say the excerpt that I read, and I talk about the two-ness and being the speaking as a twin. My kind of sense of two-ness is born out of is definitely out of the national division, but another level, it's also born out of my dislocation. So when I left Korea as a child, I used to think that there was another me that stayed and that kept living, in Korea. So this other me, my twin self, was still in Korea. So I think that I really depend on her quite a bit to catch these things. So I think it was really her who translated the birds. And then she tells me. So it's that sort of idea of having to sort of return to that place where my twin is. And so, this is why I also mentioned about the language return. So this is how I retrieve memory, how I retrieve history that's been buried. So that's...
Thank you. Having heard of that, Uljana?
Well, the idea of twin is something that runs through Don Mee's work and that has always fascinated me. I can immediately respond to it. But I don't think I've ever heard you so clearly that she's the translator, the one who gives the dictation in a way, which is fascinating because one of the things I mentioned in the essay, which I also cut, is the idea if you come from a place that doesn't exist anymore in whatever way, it's a childhood home or the one that was replaced or because of some death or something that occurred, there's always that sense of uninterrupted sending, right? Transmitters who are sending without receivers, and the receivers who are sort of not picking up signals or picking up other signals, and that's an idea I explored also when I wrote about Teresa Hakyun-cha, a Korean writer who lived in New York and published this book Dictate, also the dictation, and it sort of comes up every now and then in sort of the idea of the sending. In the context that we're working on, there was another poem by Kim Hye-sun from the autobiography of death, about a bright letter being sent from the past, which also speak to that. It's a wonderful book. I'm a big fan of Dan Mee's work, and I'm especially a big fan of Hardly War also, which I read and taught many times and translated a few bits, so co-translated some. And the idea came, or the desire was always there to translate it because it's so untranslatable, because it runs between Korean and English, and also sort of visual, right? Visual poetry. Now I started with DMZ because of its interest in documentary politics. Something we haven't talked about today is that big parts of the book are based on interviews that you did with survivors and with orphans. And some of these are just short, sort of almost like reports. Others are iterations that sort of fall apart and come back together of torture and of how you try to find a language to write about it. And that's a very, very fascinating and sometimes very hard thing to translate. and the idea of that twin, or that twinness, or that sending runs through it, and it's something that's very important for me. There was something else I wanted to say, which I forget. Maybe you keep talking, and I'll come back to it. It's already been sent to the wrong receiver. So maybe.
Yeah, just one more question. We didn't talk about this question. I promised you not to surprise you on the stage, but now I'm doing that. Sorry for that. But it's a basic question. So in your text, I mean, in both of your texts, you wrote a book, and you also shared your pamphlet. Translation is a mode. Translation is an anti-neocolonial mode. Both of you questions or even criticize the concept of national literature, which is very strongly bound to the idea of one nation, one language. And you are mixing up the languages in your works, and you're also dealing with many different languages. And you're also living in Berlin, where you just listen to abundant of languages every day. So do you think that national literature, can we just keep this concept and just make it diverse? Or is it just done with national literature? Should we just find another concept?
I don't know, I haven't thought about this much. Of course, I'm just spontaneously thinking if we add a post to it, right? If it's a post-national, I think we can never get rid of it. But the same way that the term post-monolingual writing was termed, because it's a different writing than the monolingual writing, but it's still reacting and being shaped by the binary of monolingual writing. The same way maybe there is, will be a sort of a post-national, because we definitely need to find in the national philologies, I think, different lenses to see what's there, not to reinvent it, or not to keep writing, multilingual literature as if it's never been done. It's all there. It's just we need to find different lenses and different tools.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Dominique?
I will just say something what Kim Il-sung has always told me, is that she really doesn't have mother tongue, which means the language that she's been given to write poetry, it's been prescribed, it's been invented by men. So she is refusing that language and creating this other language, even though she's still writing in Korean, but that's why she's creating these vowels, these other sounds that are embarrassing, right? That are shameful. I know that we talked about shame as well. And she often gets asked, like, if her poetry represents, Korean poetry, then she always says, "No, I'm writing. My poetry is from Republic of Kim Il-sung."
Yeah, thank you for sharing with us that. Well, I'm looking at the watch.
2 republics.
Yeah, at least. We have 2 republics there, audience members said just. Well, we are coming to the end slowly, but after we stop sending our images and voices across the internet, well, the audience here have the chance to ask us questions or just come to us and share your emotions and thoughts. But for all the other audience who are at home, where can we see you in the near future, and what are you up to in next months?
I'm just going to hide and write.
Me too, but I wanted to say that you can see Don Mee Choi again in May in Cologne at the Poetica Festival, which I have the honor of curating, and it is themed on the idea of sort of documentary poetics. So it's the international festival with 10 artists, and Don Mee is one of them, will present their work, and it has been postponed twice, but it will happen now, of course, and it's the first week of May 2nd to 7th, and you're all, of course, invited, and I hope we'll see each other there again.
I didn't know that you're coming to Cologne even.
Yes.
I keep forgetting.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for telling that.
Yes.
Well, and also, I mentioned it briefly in the first, but your translation of Miss DMZ Colony
Yes.
will be appearing in this fall by Spectre Books.
Spectre Books, yes, we're very
Yes.
happy about that, and we'll definitely, start organizing readings. So keep looking for events.
All right, so I'll just wrap it up for the streaming, but thank you for being with us tonight. And also, I also really thank you, Holzbrink, and also University Leipzig, and also DAD, and of course, Literaturhaus Berlin. Well, maybe I forgot one or two.
No.
Yeah, but I also thank you, Vanessa, Rike, and Sophie for helping us with the organization. Thank you a
Thank you
lot.
very much.
Thank you.